Hi, I'm George Delis Reyes. I'm managing partner at Cortado Group. You hear a lot about operational alpha, and you obviously read about it. And the way it translates in our engagements are truly when the client has their first QBR or their second QBR. And I say that because that's where the proof is in the pudding, right? And when I specifically am referencing is around forecast accuracy, right? I have not met a operating partner or a deal partner that has walked into a QBR or has exited a QBR scratching their head wondering, "Hey, is this forecast believable?" Right? Can I believe that they're gonna deliver on what they said, right? And it's because of that reality, right? That doubt that is persistent in the minds of the private equity firm is where we begin to see a lot of our initiatives, our work really make an impact. One of the things I love to talk about around operational alpha is this theme that we've seen develop over the course of our, last year is really around back to the basics, right? So what I mean by that is if you want to deliver on operational alpha, which is essentially value creation, right? And value creation that's measurable, value creation that's predictable, value creation that is believable, right? You got to you got to address the basics, especially in the market that we play in, right? We play in the mid to lower mid market, and most of the firms that are in that space, in that segment of the market, they are relatively immature when it comes to technology, process adherence, et cetera, right? So the ability to really not just deliver on value creation or operational alpha, right? But to make it believable so that when you walk into a QBR and the sales leader of that portfolio company says, "Hey, this is what we're going to close in this quarter," that the board, right, is saying, "Yeah, I get it. I see it. I believe it. I can believe the KPIs that you're reporting, not just wishful thinking, but hey, you can prove through a series of these are the right activities that we're executing on that are going to lead to the right outcomes. And I'm measuring those activities that are leading to those right outcomes. So I think what are the right behaviors that we're monitoring, the right behaviors that we're trying to inculcate into our sales organization and marketing teams that are leading to what we would call leading indicators, those things that'll tell you that you're going in the right direction that ultimately lead to closed and booked revenue, closed and revenue recognition. So the things that we do, right? Again, it's all around back to the basics. It's all fundamentals around people, process, technology, etc. I wish I could tell you that there is a magic bullet, right, that solves or addresses, the problem, right? We look at people, we look at processes, we look at technology, right? And that all presupposes that you are, you've properly defined where you have the right to win, right? Everybody's heard the phrase, who's my ideal customer profile or who are the personas that I sell to, right? I mean, those at this point should be table stakes, but you'd be super shocked to find that how many of are the organizations that we deal with don't do that well, right? So if you don't even know what pond you should be fishing in or what, over what, um, wreck you should be, dropping your lines over, right? It's really going to be hard to deliver, right? So once you've properly defined that, and so one of the first things I look for is tell me about your ideal customer profile. Tell me how you defined it, right? Have you been able to not just determine who you have a right to win with, but how much can you possibly sell to them, right? So you think of not just my net new customers, but my upsell and cross sell. So I look for those things. I look for clarity on my bullseye, right? Where I'm going to point my people, my processes in pursuit of my revenue goals, right? Then, so then what is the other leading indicators is around, do they Do they have a process that they follow that's adhered to, that is inspected, that is measured, and that's reported on, right? It doesn't have to be the best sales process in the world, right? But I have to have something that's, you know, what we would call buyer driven, right? What that means is that the buyer is telling you that they're advancing, not the rep saying, "Oh, I've done this, therefore they're further along in their buyer's journey." But that process needs to be defined, it needs to be adhered to, it needs to be inspected, et cetera, right? It needs to be reported on. Because if you don't have that, there's no way that you're going to have data going into your CRM, which is the next element, right? Do you have a good CRM that's architected in a way that allows you to input your data in such a way that you can measure properly? But if you don't have a good process that's adhered to, the reps aren't going to be putting the data in. And guess what? If you don't get good data in, you're not going to get reporting coming out, right? So we look for things like that. Those are some of the things that tell me that, hey, they've defined where they have the right to win. They got a process that they're following. They have managers that are managing to it, and they're reporting on it regularly. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least if they have those fundamentals, we can tweak them, right? We can get sharper with, hey, where do you have a better right to win? How do you improve that process? And what are some tweaks to the CRM that you can make to allow you to, report out or dashboard out to the board? Because they're always going to want to know how things are going. But those are things that I look for in the very beginning of engagements. The proof's in the pudding, right? There are several engagements that we got in there. We did some of this fundamental, foundational, back to basics types work that led to one, an acceleration in value creation, right? That's kind of ethereal, right? But what does that mean? That they actually achieved their investment thesis. Like in other words, they said, "Hey, we wanted this company to grow from X to Y." They did it. It became far more marketable, and they were able to successfully exit it. So that, when you hear those things and you have those proof points, definitely that's where you begin to get those callbacks. Hey, you did this for us. Can you do it over here in this other portfolio company? At the end of the day, operational alpha is just another fancy way of saying, hey, we're going to grow, right? A lot of the times, in the past, right, when private equity would get the outcomes they wanted, right? And the outcomes are multiples on their investment or return on cash, et cetera, through, let's, be honest, some financial engineering, right? Their money was very inexpensive, right? So you use the arbitrage of what you borrowed, et cetera, the money had to, and what you were able to, how you're able to grow through maybe some operational efficiencies. But as we know, that's gone, right? That era is gone, and the companies that we work with now, especially in the market that we play in, they have to grow healthy top line growth, right? They need not just top line revenue, but they need to be profitable top line revenue, right? So when you think operational alpha, it's okay. What are the things that are going to drive sustained, scalable value creation, right? What are those things, right? And again, I don't want to kind of sound like a broken record, but it's a story about fundamentals, right? I mean, if you talk to, watch any 20 for 20 on ESPN or on any great, legendary football team or coach, whatever, it's all about the basics, right? You got to execute the basics, right? And when it comes to operational alpha and sustained value creation, it's about the basics, right? Do I know where I have a right to win? Do I got a process that it's adhered to? Are my managers coaching my reps, right? Do I have a CRM that's accurately capturing the data and reporting on it, right? Am I enabling my people to succeed in the moment where it matters most, right? When I'm belly to belly or on the phone with a customer and I have to bring value, right? Am I enabling that moment, right? These are basic things, right? That a company that needs to grow and scale has to do exceedingly well, right? And the good thing is that, you know, I have not found one or maybe one or a couple, not many, right, that do this, in excellent. They just don't, right? There's always room for improvement. So when we talk again, about operational alpha is sustained, consistent, scalable value creation over time, right? That's driven by repeatable behaviors, right? That lead to success. And, so what we do is when we get in there, right, we focus on, okay, where are they great? And what are they doing that's great? And let's kind of bottle that up and spread it across the organization. And where are the gaps? And let's fill and close those gaps so that they can have effective and efficient execution that leads to that, again, sustainable outcomes, which is operational alpha. I have a friend who is I always tell him he's the poster child of infomercials. Like, it's the latest and greatest, right? He always falls for them. Anything that comes out. And I bring that up because I think AI in a lot of ways is like that. Like the AI, I can apply it here, I can apply it there. It's going to solve all things. It's going to be the instant gratification, right? The fast fix. And what we found is, and there's reports on this that 95% of AI implementations have failed. They haven't delivered. Why? Because the underlying foundation of any AI implementation are basic fundamental processes and good data, right? You can't, you know, AI is automation on steroids. It's intelligent automation on steroids. So if you're going to do that, you don't want to, automate a bad process. You don't want to look at and draw conclusions from bad data. But so if you don't fix some of your fundamentals, throwing AI at it is just going to cause more problems, right? So what are some things that we look for? I mean, I've said it earlier, like the foundation, and I love using the analogy of a house, right? Everybody's seen a house being built, right? What do they start with? A foundation, right? And you don't just put that foundation anywhere, right? You don't put it in the middle of the street. You don't put it in the middle of a pond. You put it in a very specific spot. In fact, they get a surveyor out and say, hey, you need to put it here, right? Likewise, when you're building a go-to-market strategy, you got to properly define where my foundation is, right? That's my ideal customer profile, where I have a right to win, where I'm going to build my go-to-market strategy, my go-to-market team, my go-to-market process on, right? That's my right to win. A corollary to that is like who within my ideal customer profile are the people I'm going to be selling to, right? Why is that important? Because I need to know how to position my value proposition, my products and services vis-a-vis my competitors so I can win, right? So I got to understand, what drives the buying decision behavior of my buyers, right? And how my product solves their problem better than my competitors, right? Foundational. If they don't have that, good luck, right? And that's a data-driven exercise, obviously, on some of the market analysis. But also it's a lot of, with the technology we have today, right, around call recordings and things like that, you can really get instant feedback on your buyers, right? At Cortado, we regularly, almost always, with the permission of our clients, we are recording calls, not for various reasons. Why? Because we want to take good notes and we want to hear what they're saying so that we can pay attention to the call, not again taking physical notes. But we also leverage that to update and augment our own understanding of our buyers of our services, right? Real time feedback in the moment, right? Why? Because we want to sharpen our positioning and our understanding of who buys our products and services, right? So that's number one. Number two is, you know, people, right? If you know who you're going to sell to and where those buyers are, right? Geographically, vertical, whatever, however you look at your market, how many are there? How big is the market, et cetera? Now, what are the type of people I need to sell my products and services? There's not one engagement that we have been asked, that I've been on personally, that I'm not asked, is my team good enough? Do I got the right people? Is my sales leader good enough? Right? Because talent is 50% of the equation, right? 50% of success is talent. And then the other 50% is, hey, you've got to enable that talent to be successful, right? So talent, do they have the right talent? Have they properly defined the job descriptions, right? Have they defined what are the key metrics for success, right? If my whole strategy is around, going and, prospecting and hunting, is my job description aligned to that? Are my people aligned to that job description, right? Et cetera, right? So I look for that. I look for just core processes, right? Lead management. How do I take a lead and qualify it and then send it to sales? Once sales gets it, what sales do to convert it to a customer? And then customer success process. Okay, how do I make them a repeat customer, right? So I look for core processes, right? And then I look for, are the systems configured to the process, right? And then lastly is really around, performance management, right? And what I mean by that is, how well is the team being held accountable for the success metrics? And how are the leaders, the sales managers or sales directors, whatever you call them, in smaller teams, it could be just a sales leader, how are they holding the team accountable? What does that cadence look like? What are the one-on-ones look like? What are the pipeline calls look like? What are the forecasting calls look like? How is that sales leader, that sales manager developing his team, optimizing the performance of his team, measuring his team against certain success criteria, right? I look for those things. So those, again, fundamentals, right? These are all fundamental things. And then the other thing and I'll just end with this on that question is, and this is something we see a lot of, right, is compensation, right? Why do I bring compensation up? Because compensation is the big motivator, right? Comp motivates behavior. Like, I am going to get paid money if I do certain things, right? So I better make sure that the things that I'm being motivated to do are the right things, and that those things that I'm being motivated, those behaviors, are aligned to the strategic imperatives of the business, right? You'd be surprised how often I walk into a situation where the compensation plan is actually motivating behavior that's detrimental or misaligned with where the company wants to go, right? You may say, wow, that's kind of odd. Like, yeah, it is odd, but I do find it quite a bit, right? Especially when a company is getting bought by private equity and the investment thesis is going in one direction or a new direction. You need to realign or those incentives to, you know, deliver on where the company needs to go, not where the company just came from, right? So that's one of the things I look for, those 4 or 5 things I just mentioned. We start consulting, right, by doing a mystery shop. The deliverable of the mystery shop is an analysis of how your competitors fare vis-a-vis you when they're engaged, right? In other words, we pose as a fictitious customer or prospect, and we just see do your competitors engage us, right? How do they position their solution services? How quickly do they respond? How well are the questions that they ask, right? We'll go on their website and look at, how they position themselves on the website, if there's any pricing that we can determine from the website or the interaction. And then what we do is it's a compare and contrast, right? This is you guys, right? And these are your top 3, 4 competitors. You, uh, prospective client of ours, it responded to our initial inquiry in a day. Your competitor did it in less than an hour. Do you find that compelling? I do, right? Because if I reach out to 3 people and the first one that calls me is probably the one that's more likely to get the business from me, et cetera. So those are the things that we do. It's really a means to stimulate conversation around, where are my gaps vis-a-vis my competitors? What am I doing that they're not doing, and what are they doing that I'm not doing, right? That's what we do when we do a mystery shop. I'll give you an example of how we lost trust. No, not us. But let me describe the scenario first. So I was deployed early on in the days of Cortado. The partners would be deployed as what we call interim sales leaders, right? So we'd literally go and sit in, and we'd be the de facto sales leader for a short period of time for a portfolio company. And the the mandate was given to me of, hey, go, you know, go hire a bunch of people, right? We think that if we just hire people, right, quick win, right? Hire if one person produces X dollar of revenue, right? So revenue per head, then 10 people should deliver, 10 times that. It's like, sure, on paper, but does the market bear it? Is the market going in the right direction, et cetera, right? So the when I was given that mandate, I said, hey, listen, the data shows and the feedback from the field is that that is the wrong move, right? We do not need an additional, and actually it was more, it was like 12 heads. We need four. We can justify four. We were told and given the mandate from our sponsor, like, you need to go hire these 12, right? And you need to do this in short order in the next 6 weeks. Imagine hiring 12 people in 6 weeks is quite an endeavor. It ended up being the wrong decision, right? And 3 months later, we had to let go of almost all of them, right? Because it was just not sustainable. They thought that it was a quick win where we had to, what we needed to do is to deploy the right amount of headcount in the right locations to deliver on the results that they wanted. But they wanted a quick win, right? They wanted hey, I wanted this many heads. I think we need to hire them right away. And they didn't listen. So that's the result, right?